Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Progress with number 2 in the viewers games. Evan from Los Angeles sent me a game. He said a recent game of mine, December 2016, which may be appropriate for the channel. Evan said he was white and his opponent was Jeremy. It was an online day with a 5-day time control, which means 5 days for every move. So it's really a correspondence game, as we call it in chess. And it was on the Chess with Friends app on the internet. Let's look at the game. Evan is white, Jeremy is black. Evan started with knight f3, d5, d4, knight f6, bishop f4, knight c6, e3, bishop g4, knight bd2 and e6. So far both players have developed their pieces to logical squares. As you can see, all the pieces are either having an influence on the center, or in the case of the bishop on g4, pinning the knight to the queen, which means the knight has less influence on the center. The central pawns have been played up and both are ready to develop their last minor piece, which is the bishop on f1 and the bishop on f8, and then put the king safe by castling. So a very healthy setup so far from both white and black. Evan tries to do something about that bishop pinning his knight. That's a bit annoying, so he plays h3, kicking the bishop, and Jeremy decides to take on f3. Good decision from Evan to take back with the knight. That's a logical square for the knight. And here Jeremy plays knight to e4. That move is okay, but it would be more in line with the rules of thumb of opening play to not play with a piece twice in the opening. If you can avoid having to play a piece twice in the opening, then you should make sure to do that. As I said, it's important to develop all your pieces, so playing with a piece twice means another piece stays undeveloped. In this case, it would have made more sense to develop the bishop on f8 to either e7 or d6. But no big harm done. Bishop d3 from Evan, developing his last minor piece, and f5. Again, it would have made more sense to develop that bishop on f8, followed by castling. Evan castles, so white has finished his development. Black is still not doing the same. He's playing h6 and is weakening his position that way. His king is still in the center, and his bishop is still at home. Evan decides to take that knight, that advanced knight on e4. Jeremy took it back with the f-pawn, attacking the knight, and knight e5 from Evan. The weakest square on the chessboard is always the f7 square and the f2 square for white, especially if the king has not castled yet. You can look at video number 9, which is a series of checkmate in the openings, where f7 is also very weak. And this is another example. The knight is already looking at f7, and there is a threat of queen d1 to h5 in the position. Jeremy does not see it. He has no sense of danger, as we call it in chess. He plays g7, g5, which will cost him the game. Let's look at what black should have done. Developing his bishop now, as I mentioned a few times in this video, at this moment is not a good idea. Let me show you. For example, bishop d6, and then black wants to castle, but he won't get there because of queen h5, check, and you're going to be checkmated. g6 doesn't help, queen takes g6, check, and then king e7 for example, and queen f7 is already checkmate. So you cannot try and finish your development, that doesn't work. Let's look at something else. As f7 is so weak, it does make sense to take the knight on e5, just get rid of that piece looking at f7, and this is indeed the best move in the position to deal with that problem. White will take back with the bishop, and then again you cannot develop your last piece, for example bishop d6, because there's a pawn hanging on g7, you're just going to lose a pawn. What you can play is queen d7. It's a good defending move, protecting the g7 square and protecting the f7 square. If now white comes with queen h5 check, you can interpose with the queen on f7, and for example, just to continue the variation, a few more moves, queen takes, king takes, and now you should not take that pawn on c7, which is unprotected, because then black is back in the game because of rook c8 hitting the bishop. The bishop has to go back, and then black gets a very active rook on the second rank, as well as taking the pawn that he lost on c7, taking the pawn on c2. So the material is equal, and this position is still slightly better for white, but black has gained from white greedily taking that pawn on c7. So knight takes e5 would have been good. It would have recognized the danger of checkmate against the exposed king. But Jeremy did not play that. As I said, he played g7, g5, hitting the bishop. But Evan rightly ignores that attack on the bishop. He goes in for the kill. Queen h5 check. King e7 is the only legal move. Queen f7 check. And there's only one square for the king, king d6. And now Evan has a beautiful checkmate. Knight e5 to c4. It's double check. Both the knight as well as the bishop are checking the black king. In case of a double check, the only way against that is to move the king. But the king has no squares. As you can see, the pawn on d4 takes the c5 square away. And the queen on f7 takes the d7 and e7 squares away. A very quick checkmate. You can see how quickly things can go wrong if you don't develop your pieces, if you don't put your king safe, and if you don't smell any danger. As Evan says, it's a miniature game that lasted 14 moves, which is definitely a case of punishing a mistake in the opening, and has a double checkmate to boot. Yes, an instructive game from Evan beating Jeremy. Hopefully Jeremy will have learned from it and will make sure to develop all his pieces in the next games and make sure to keep his king safe, and especially keep an eye on that always problematic square f7 or f2 for white. Many games have been won and lost because of that square. Hope you enjoyed this video, found it instructive. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the Chess to Progress channel, and I'm looking forward to your comments. This is Rick from Chess to Progress. Thank you for watching.